Lagos, the nation's commercial capital. This is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Ijoma Onyato.
Hello and welcome. Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 raises concern over rising COVID-19 fatalities in the country, fears virus could be airborne. Embattled acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Ibrahim Magu, denies relooting interest on recovered funds. Bandits killed at least 24 people, injure several others in attack on 3 communities in Kaduna State. And World Health Organization raises concern that too many countries are headed in the wrong direction in the fight against COVID-19. Plus, we'll have business, sports, news from Abuja, the FCT, and later on news from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, federal government plans to develop new 4-year medium-term expenditure framework for the country.
On sports news tonight, Court of Arbitration for Sport overturns Manchester City's 2-year ban from European football by UEFA.
And from Abuja, Niger Delta Development Commission Interim Management Committee absent at scheduled meeting with the Senate Committee investigating the crisis rocking the NDDC. The 740 fatalities so far recorded from COVID-19 in the country are becoming the source of concern for the Presidential Task Force. The PTF is also aligning itself with recent studies which suggest that the virus could be airborne and is therefore asking some changes for the way officers conduct their operations. Specifically, the government is reiterating the need for all Nigerians to take responsibility for their health. They're also asking government officers to embrace virtual meetings where necessary.
Members of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 return from the midterm review of the activities since the last 3 months of its inauguration as they brief on their new findings. Both the chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 and the Minister of Health expressed concern about the rising number of fatalities recorded in Nigeria in the last 1 week.
13,447 COVID-19 cases have so far been treated and successfully discharged in Nigeria, and we have regrettably recorded 740 fatalities on the whole. Our aim is to further reduce the fatalities.
The rising fatalities in Nigeria is not unconnected with denial and delay in seeking help. The last week recorded the highest weekly fatality of 70 deaths.
From 645 fatalities reported as at July the 5th, the number of COVID-19 related deaths rose to 740 as at Sunday, July 12th. The number of confirmed cases also rose from 28,711 to 32,558 during the same period. The Director General of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control informs the gathering about a recent finding on the mode of transmitting the virus.
Over the past few weeks, increasing evidence has emerged that in addition to droplet infection, we cannot rule out that airborne transmission is also possible as a mode of transmission of COVID-19. And WHO has released updated its guidelines on this, saying exactly the same thing.
The PTF chairman also highlights what must be done to reduce infections and death.
The PTF wishes to reiterate the following. All government offices shall continue to hold virtual meetings in their offices, especially where participants exceed 4 persons, and they should also suspend unnecessary travels for meetings. I must not close without reiterating the need for all of us to remain conscious of the fight before us. The pandemic would not go away by wishing, neither would it go away if we refuse to keep safe. Please, let's all resolve to play our part.
The World Health Organization had in the past commended the Nigerian government's response to COVID-19, especially as fatality rate remains very low compared with some countries in the region. However, the recent surge in the number of deaths and confirmed cases should be a cause of concern, not only for the government, but also for individuals who may have lowered their guards.
And while the PTF raises concern over the rising deaths, the Nigerian Medical Association in Kwara State says at least 35 doctors in the state have so far tested positive for COVID-19 since the virus broke out. The Kwara State chairman of the NMA, Dr. Kolade Sholagberu, explains that in spite of the rising cases, the association has not recorded any casualty among its members.
In Kwara State, between 30 and 35 of our members have been affected by COVID-19, and they were treated at the isolation center, Sobi Specialist Hospital, now designated as COVID-19 and Infectious Disease Center. We thank the government, particularly led by the chairman of the COVID-19 Technical Committee, Mr. Kayode Alabi, who actually also pay a visit to them individually and to their family as a way of also giving them support. Even all the preventive measures, none of them still have 100% preventive capability. So government has tried their best by providing the PPEs, but even along with that, there is still probability and the risk of health workers getting infected. And that's why we are calling on the government to also consider people that are working on the field, not directly in the isolation center, because these are people that are also at higher risk of getting infected.
We move on to Lagos, where efforts to resolve the warning strike declared by the Medical Guild in the state are ongoing. And that's according to the chairman of the Medical Guild in the state, Dr. Olujimi Sodipo. The Guild had declared a 3-day warning strike beginning from today over issues they say affect their safety and welfare. According to Dr. Sodipo, who was a guest on our COVID-19 program update, the talks followed the intervention of relevant authorities in the state.
Our major concern truly has to do with ensuring that the welfare of the members are looked into so that the members could actually look after the public, which is our primary responsibility. We take this issue with all the seriousness that it deserves. And that was why the decision that was taken took into consideration the fact that we might not be able to achieve everything that we want. But the most important thing is that we start these discussions, we keep the discussions going. I think the challenge that we had was somewhere along the line, there was a break in communication because following the first ultimatum, the reason why it was extended was to give an ability for all parties to meet and, keep on meeting because the challenges are unfolding. So we've started the discussions. I wouldn't want to mention any specific thing here, but anything that would have to cater for the welfare of medical doctors, other healthcare workers, and of course, in generality, the citizens is what we are looking out for. And we just hope that, as I said, within the shortest possible time, we could have a peaceful resolution to this and a permanent one. And we go back to what we are used to doing, which is saving lives.
Meanwhile, the Lagos state government is asking the striking doctors to return to work. The state government said that despite the wrong claims by the Guild, the state government has been extremely supportive of health workers, especially those at the forefront of fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. On the disparity over doctors' salaries, the state government says the skipping policy adopted by some federal institutions is responsible for this, as the minimum wage in Lagos State places all members of the state above the federal level. The doctors had raised concerns over heavy taxation of health workers, requests for residential quarters, hazard allowance for health workers, COVID-19 insurance cover, among other things. The acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Mr. Ibrahim Magu, continued his appearance before the presidential panel investigating the activities of the commission under his leadership today for a second week running. His counsel, Mr. Wahab Shitu, in a statement today denied reports making the rounds that the EFCC relooted the interest on the 550 billion naira recovered by the agency. Mr. Shitu describes the allegation as false, explaining further that the alleged transaction never featured in the proceedings before the presidential panel. He added that no such amount is in any such account and that the recovered funds are lodged in the Treasury single account with the Central Bank of Nigeria, and such recovered funds do not generate interest. Mr. Magu has been appearing before the panel, sitting inside the old banquet hall of the presidential villa Abuja since Monday last week, when he was arrested and has since been in police custody from where he attends the panel. Last week, his lawyer wrote a letter to the Inspector General of Police asking the police chief to grant him administrative bail. Meanwhile, there are also reports that some directors of the EFCC were also questioned by the presidential panel. In the meantime, the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, has given a 7-day ultimatum to an online medium, Sahara Reporters, to retract what he describes as libelous and defamatory publications against him. In addition, the minister is asking Sahara Reporters to issue a public apology to be published on the platform and on the front pages of 3 national newspapers for 3 consecutive days. Mr. Malami, in a statement by his media aide, Umar Gwandu, says a series of publications by Sahara Reporters has subjected him to considerable distress, psychological trauma, anxiety, and greatly injured his character and reputation, which is capable of lowering his estimation in the eyes of right-thinking persons in society. He noted particularly that on July the 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2020, Sahara Reporters, in what appears like a coordinated attack, viciously wrote and maliciously published libelous and defamatory articles against his personality. The minister says it's pertinent to note that the publications are untrue, a fabrication, or at best a figment of the imagination of Sahara Reporters, and are unsupported howsoever. To security now, at least 24 persons have been reported killed and several others injured after gunmen attacked 3 communities in Zango Kataf local government area of Kaduna State over the weekend. The attacks occurred despite the curfew imposed on the council by the Kaduna State government. Although police authorities are yet to confirm the incident, the chairman of Zango Kataf local government, Elias Manza, told Channels Television that the attackers, suspected to be herders, first attacked Chibok village on Friday night, killing 9 people, with many others seriously injured, while many houses were burnt. He said similar attacks were carried out by gunmen in Sabun Kaura village, where 15 people were also killed, while the third attack at Angwam Audu village yesterday night left several houses and farmlands burnt and many injured. Several families are said to have been displaced from their homes as a result of the attacks. The council chairman appeared for deployment of more security operatives to Zango Kataf to forestall further attacks. Meanwhile, the presidency has been reacting to the recent communal conflicts in Zango Kataf local government area of Kaduna State. While commiserating with the families of the victims of the clashes on the presidency's Twitter handle, President Muhammadu Buhari condemned the cycle of attacks and reprisals, saying it would only compound the problem. He describes the situation as a path that only leads to worsening outcomes and pushes the warring parties farther away from justice and reconciliation. Dialogue and restraint remain the only foundation for lasting peace. President Buhari expressed the hope of a new dawn of peace, justice and security in the area, while drafting a planned implementation of a white paper from various reconciliation committees set up to look into the crisis. And in part 2, after the break, military claims landmines planted on bad roads by insurgents impeding their operations and causing loss of lives in the fight against insurgents. That's in a moment. Do stay with us. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, coming to you live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 raises concern over rising COVID-19 fatalities in the country, fears virus could be airborne. Embattled acting chairman of Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Ibrahim Mago, denies relooting interest on recovered funds. Bandits kill at least 24 people, injure several others in attack on 3 communities in Kaduna State. And World Health Organization raises concern that too many countries are heading in the wrong direction in the fight against COVID-19. Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Do subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple TV, Android, Fire TV, and Roku as well. In Taraba State, a former senator representing Northern Taraba, Ambuno Zik Sunday, and the cleric of Taraba State Police Command Mosque, Muhammad Nuhu, have been kidnapped in Taraba State. The former senator was abducted in his hometown, Karim Lamido local government area of Taraba on Sunday, while the police cleric was kidnapped in his house in Jalingo in the early hours of today. The police public relations officer, David Missel, confirmed the incidents while parading a cache of arms recovered from suspected bandits who were currently at large. He, however, says efforts are in top gear to rescue them unhurt.
The imam of our mosque here, whom we received an unfortunate report this early morning, that some group of armed men suspected to be kidnappers invaded his house in the night and actually took him to yet to be identified place. Effort is on. Of course, we won't tell you how far we have gone with investigation, but the Commissioner of Police has directed that the operatives of the command should go behind whosoever must have done that to ensure his rescue. And talking of the former senator, it occurred in Karim Lamido barely about 24 hours ago. Also, we received such an information that he was kidnapped in his house. Similarly, what we are applying here to rescue our own is the same thing we are doing. So the general public should support us, support the effort of the Commissioner of Police and his team to ensure that we are able to rescue them healthy and healthy.
We continue with security matters, but this time in the northeast, where the military is complaining that landmines planted on bad roads are impeding their operational mobility and causing loss of lives. They want the government to fix the roads, along with the reconstruction of sacked communities.
In this hole lay a landmine detected, detonated by the Nigerian Army in Marate local government area of Borno State. Bomb sweepers discover yet another explosive, a daily occurrence according to the commanding officer. Few minutes later, the Borno State Governor Babagana Zulum arrives in line with his routine supervision of construction work in Marte, recently liberated by the military.
The last incident we had is exactly where you are standing now.
He is now faced with a new challenge, and that is safe access to the liberated town.
Today again, as we're just coming now, the same thing just happened.
Inside Marate, now a ghost town, construction of shelters and government buildings have already commenced. Construction is ongoing with heavy security presence. No harassment or attack has been recorded in the town since the work began. The government intends to move the villagers now taking shelter in nearby towns back to their ancestral home.
Well, you can understand that reconstruction, rehabilitation, and resettlement is one of the 10 facts agenda of this administration. We wanted to ensure resettlement of internally displaced persons to their hometowns so that they can start their means of livelihood.
The Borno state government says it would have to liaise with the federal government to address the access road problem. In the interim, thousands of Marte villagers traced to Dikwa and Mafa local government areas benefit from the government's palliatives.
In Mapa, we reach about 10,000 households, and in Dikwa, about 38,000 households.
While the beneficiaries are happy with the livelihood any food donation provides, they are concerned about eking out a living for themselves.
This food will sustain us for 2 or 3 weeks, and after then, if God helps us, we can get another help. They will bring it again.
Part of the motive of government's resettlement drive is to discourage the dependency lifestyle the insurgency has forced on the people. But the new challenge that unfolds as the war rages is proving to be a setback to developmental plans.
Let's cross over to Abuja now, and here's Linda Akigbe. Linda.
Hello, Ijoma. Welcome to Abuja. Members of the Interim Management Committee, IMC, of the Niger Delta Development Commission, NEDC, were unable to attend a meeting with the Senate Committee on Niger Delta Affairs scheduled for today. The committee is investigating the alleged illegal sacking of some employees of the NDDC between February and May this year. The Director of Human Resources, NEDC, Mr. Silas Anyanwu, however, explained to committee members that the Managing Director of the NDDC, Professor Daniel Ponde, and other IMC members were held back at the House of Representatives, where they are appearing before another committee. The chairman of the Senate Committee on Niger Delta Affairs therefore adjourned the meeting to Tuesday, July 14th. The NDDC has been embroiled in a series of investigations in the National Assembly over allegations of financial recklessness.
What we are doing tomorrow, or what we are here for, is based on petitions written to this committee, written to the Senate. It is not based on this committee's position, and that's why the Senate mandated us to go and investigate. It is a Senate resolution based on it. So for anybody to say that the committee, allegation by the committee, this committee has not made any allegation against anybody. This committee has not made any allegation. We are investigating a motion that was debated by the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and we were asked as the members of this committee to go and investigate the allegations put forward. So for anybody to say that the allegations were made by this committee, it's unfortunate, misleading, and to say the least, it must be based on person misunderstanding of the workings of the National Assembly. And if he needs to know, he should ask, and they'll tell him.
Away from the National Assembly, the trial of alleged kidnapped kingpin Hamisu Bala, popularly known as Wadume, and 6 others continued at the Federal High Court Abuja today, with the prosecution presenting 6 guns said to have been recovered from Wadume and his gang. The accused is standing trial for alleged kidnap for ransom, illegal gun running, and offences bordering on terrorism. At the last sitting of the court last week, the case was stalled following the absence of the trial judge, Justice Binta Muruta Nyako. Prior to that, Justice Nyako had rejected the bail application of the defendants on the grounds that the court had accepted to give the matter accelerated hearing. Justice Muruta Nyako had thereafter ordered the defendants to be moved from the custody of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad of the police to the Kuje Correctional Center in the nation's capital. Some sections of the World Trade Center building located in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, have been gutted by fire. The fire, which occurred around 11:30 a.m., was said to have started from the 19th floor of the skyscraper and spread to other parts of the building before it was put out by firefighters. An official of the company managing the facility told Channels Television that 3 trucks were deployed to put out the fire, saying that there was no damage to the building as a result. The structure is a complex of 8 buildings, much of which is under construction in the Central Business District of the Federal Capital Territory. When the News at 10 returns, federal government plans to develop new 4-year medium-term expenditure framework for the country. That's in Business News. Join us again. You're welcome back to the News at 10, coming to you live from Abuja. The chairman of the Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, Professor James Momoh, says Nigeria needs over $2.1 billion to fix the electricity sector in the next 5 years. Professor Momoh stated this at a meeting with members of the Senate Committee on Power in Abuja. According to him, the sector currently faces several infrastructure challenges, including the lack of modern equipment to enable effective generation and distribution of power.
There is definitely an obsolete equipment challenge. We have mismatch in the value chain. For what you generate, you can't market it. What you market is not even getting to the customers due to a lot of reasons. We are still dealing with fault in Nigeria. We should be talking about quality of power. We should be talking about network that is sensitive to its own environment. This is the challenge that our country faces, and until we put more money, modernize the grid, improve the grid, put the SCADA around it, put communication devices around it, change it, go to the next voltage level, we are in there yet. If we were to meet the target of 2025, there is a need for over $2.1 billion that will be needed to improve the distribution network. If we were to improve the transmission need as of today, compared with what we need in 25 years from now, we are talking about another $2.something billion. So overall, there is a big, huge gap here. And the commitment of investors, of government, to bringing money to improve the quality of life and quality of service and infrastructure it cannot be underestimated at all.
And that's all from Abuja. Back to you, Joma.
Thanks a lot, Linda. The candidates of the All Progressives Congress in the upcoming Edo State governorship election, Pastor Osage Ize-Iyamu, has officially launched his campaign manifesto titled The Simple Agenda. At his campaign office in Benin City today, Pastor Ize-Iyamu reiterated that the 50-page document is his covenant with the people of Edo State, which can be used to assess his performance if given the opportunity to serve as governor of the state. He further explains that his sample agenda, that's the simple agenda, is one that is specific, measurable, accurate, reliable, and time-bound.
The X in simple stands for security and social welfare. Now the I is infrastructural development and urban renewal. M in simple agenda stands for manpower development. And after that, of course, you have a P. P stands for public-private partnership. L in simple agenda stands for leadership by example. Finally, the E in simple agenda talks about employment and empowerment scheme. We cannot leave things the way they are.
Let's take a look at some business news now. Here's Teniola Shobowale.
Thanks, Ijoma. Welcome to Business News. The Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, Mr. Clem Agba, has announced plans by the federal government to commence the formulation of the 2026 to 2030 medium-term expenditure framework. At a meeting with members of the House of Representatives Committee on National Planning and Economic Development in Abuja, Mr. Agba explains that the agenda is expected to drive the federal government's social and economic development plans.
We are also working simultaneously on the perspective plan for the nation. Not only the replacement or successor plan to the RGP, which is the medium-term plan from 2021 to 2025. We are working on 2 medium-term plans, another one from 2026 to 2030. Then a perspective plan, which is a very long-term plan with a 30 years horizon, which we call the Nigeria Agenda 2050.
Nigeria's Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Mr. Timipre Silva, has held talks with Saudi's Minister for Energy, Abdulaziz bin Salman, on developments within the global oil markets. The discussion between the two ministers, which was held via phone, focused on ways to improve demand for oil, progress made so far towards full implementation of the OPEC Plus agreement, and rebalancing of the market. The two ministers are hopeful that efforts made by OPEC Plus countries to meet production cuts agreement will strengthen stability and help achieve a rebalancing in global oil markets. The Central Bank of Nigeria has directed all banks to discontinue the processing of new documents for maize imports into the country with immediate effect. In a statement released today, the financial market regulator says the move is as a part of its efforts to increase local production, stimulate a rapid economic recovery, safeguard rural livelihoods, and increase jobs, which were lost as a result of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, the CBN has directed authorized dealers to submit existing import documents called Form M, which were open for importation of the commodity by Wednesday this week. Investors lost more than 55 billion naira at the local stock market today after sell-offs on some Tier 1 bank weighed on overall market performance in the start of the week. Bisi Adebayo tells us more.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Reports. Nigeria's equities market did not get off to a bright start to the week as investors remained reluctant in taking new positions. Traders say this is definitely connected to the increasing number of COVID-19 cases in Nigeria and the weak economic conditions, which is making investors to trade cautiously and seek trading opportunities in only fundamentally sound stocks. This is evident in the volume of shares traded, which remains extremely low, as we can see. Now, although the financial sector was the major driver of market volume, it's also worthy to note that MTN Nigeria was responsible for almost 50% of today's value, and that's because of renewed interest in the telco industry, which is believed to be the most thriving under the pandemic. Sectorally, 3 of the 5 sub-indexes were in the red except the consumer and industrial goods sector, which was driven by a 0.61% gain recorded by Boa Cement, and all of these pushed the all-share index down by 0.44%. Traders expect that the negative sentiment will continue until at least maybe 2 or 3 earnings results are out to define the next state of the market. We'll see how that goes anyway. And that's it on the Stock Market Reports. I am Bisi Adebayo.
Thanks a lot, Bisi. Well, it may be a negative close for Nigeria's stock market today, but most of the world's leading stock market ended Monday's session with a positive start for the week after the U.S. gave a fast-track designation for 2 potential COVID-19 vaccines. Here are some closing figures for the day. And that's Business News Tonight. It's back to you, Ijoma.
Thanks a lot, Teniola. Still ahead on the news at 10, World Health Organization raises concern that too many countries are headed in the wrong direction in the fight against COVID-19. Plus more stories from our London studio and around the world in 5. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the news at 10. The Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, has warned the pandemic is going to get worse and worse if certain governments do not take decisive action to curb the spread of the disease. Dr. Ghebreyesus also says there have been dangerous increases in cases in countries where proven measures to reduce the risk are not implemented or followed, and that too many countries are heading in the wrong direction. Here's Simon Pusey with more international news in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. The World Health Organization has reported a global daily record for coronavirus cases after more than 230,000 infections were reported in just 24 hours. Deaths in Mexico from the pandemic have risen above 35,000, with the Latin American country overtaking Italy for the world's fourth highest death toll, behind only the US, Brazil and the UK. In Spain, a judge has prohibited Catalan authorities from confining about 160,000 people, but the region's leader, Quim Torra, has advised people to stay in their homes anyway to prevent a surge in the virus. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has urged the public in England to wear masks in shops as an extra insurance policy against COVID-19 and said the government would issue fresh guidance this week.
I do think that in shops it is very important to wear a face covering if you're going to be in a confined space and you want us to protect other people and to receive protection in turn. Yes, face coverings I think people should be wearing in shops.
South Africa has introduced new restrictions, including another ban on alcohol sales to help contain the spread of the virus. A nighttime curfew has been imposed and the wearing of masks outdoors has been made compulsory. President Cyril Ramaphosa said the alcohol ban, the second this year, would take pressure off the national healthcare system. It comes as total infections exceed 250,000.
We need to save every bed in our health facility.
Poland's incumbent president Andrzej Duda has narrowly beaten challenger Rafał Trzaskowski in the country's presidential vote. Duda has won 51.2% of the votes, that's according to the National Electoral Commission. It is Poland's most narrow presidential election victory since the end of communism in 1989. Duda's win is expected to lead to further controversial reforms to the judiciary and continued opposition to abortion and gay rights. China has announced sanctions against US officials, including 2 senators, in retaliation against Washington's sanctions against senior Chinese officials over Beijing's treatment of minority Uyghur Muslims. The Chinese Foreign Ministry did not elaborate on what the sanctions will entail, but Washington's measures against Chinese officials have included freezing of US assets and US travel, as well as bans on Americans from doing business with them. The average precipitation of China's Yangtze River region recorded from June this year has reached the second highest since 1961. That's according to the Emergency Management Department. So far, floods have affected over 37 million people in 27 provinces, autonomous regions and municipalities, leaving 141 people dead or missing and 28,000 homes collapsed. A row has broken out over whether the mayor of Seoul, who was found dead last week in an apparent suicide, should have been given a publicly funded funeral amid sexual harassment allegations. Park Won-soon was one of South Korea's most influential leaders and was seen as a possible presidential candidate. His body was found in woods on Friday and his funeral began on Monday. His death came just a day after his secretary made a police complaint about his behaviour. More than 500,000 people have signed a petition saying Park's state-run funeral should not go ahead. Tokyo's governor has said the Olympic Games must happen next year as a symbol of world unity in overcoming coronavirus. The 2020 Olympics were scheduled to start this month but were postponed. Yuriko Koika has pledged to win public support for the Games, although a media survey has shown a majority think they should be cancelled or postponed again. At least 21 sailors have needed medical treatment following a fire on a US Navy ship at a San Diego naval base in California. Thick smoke visible for miles engulfed much of the USS Bonhomme Richard warship for several hours as numerous firefighting boats in the harbour poured streams of water onto the burning vessel. The ship's commander has said the cause of the explosion remains unclear. In South Africa, gusts of winds have blown huge amounts of sea foam onto the shore, covering it in a snow-like blanket of white. Along the Cape Town coast, sea foam blew across the land, covering the ground as well as vehicles parked nearby. Authorities have urged residents to remain indoors and not risk venturing outside. The wet and windy conditions are expected to continue through to Wednesday this week. And finally, Israel's Nature and Parks Authority has been encouraging people to hug trees to help overcome the sense of detachment the coronavirus social distancing rules can bring. The response to the initiative has been positive, and park visitors have said they have found comfort in tree hugging. The campaign follows a similar endeavour launched in April by Iceland's Forestry Service. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Thanks a lot, Simon. On to sports now. Here's Olumide Mokoli.
Thank you, Ijoma. Hello and welcome to Sports News. The Super Eagles of Nigeria goalkeeper Maduka Okoye has joined Dutch club Sparta Rotterdam on a 2-year contract with an option of another 2. The 22-year-old who moves to the club on a free transfer from Germany's Fortuna Düsseldorf is expected to undergo medicals before his presentation to the media. Manchester United missed a chance to move up to 3rd in the Premier League table following a 2-2 draw with Southampton at Old Trafford. A Paul Pogba error allowed Stuart Armstrong to put the Saints ahead, but Anthony Martial assisted Marcus Rashford before scoring himself to hand the Red Devils a 2-1 lead at halftime. However, a 96th-minute equaliser from Michael Obafemi secured the Saints a late point to keep United 5th in the table.
Thanks, Olumide. And the main news again. The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 today raised concerns over the increasing number of deaths from the virus. The PTF also agreed with the WHO that the virus could be airborne. They expressed these concerns at the briefing today, which also reviewed the PTF's midterm activities. Also today, the embattled acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Ibrahim Magu, denied relooting interest on recovered funds as his probe enters week 2. The denial was contained in a statement by his counsel, Wahab Shitu. And the World Health Organization today raised concern that too many countries are headed in the wrong direction in the fight against COVID-19. That's the news at 10 tonight. Thanks so much for staying with us. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Do have a good night and do stay safe as well.